Dear one in self, my name is Deepanjali. I live in Pondicherry. Here I am presenting my paper on analysis of analogies in Advaitha Deepika as part of the Narayana Gurukula webinar. The Advaitha Deepika is a very elegant philosophical poem penned by Narayana Guru. Before I begin, I offer salutations at the feet of Guru Parampara. What is an analogy? In simple terms, it is a comparison of two otherwise unlike things based on resemblance of a particular aspect. Analogy, in its broadest definition, is in fact an umbrella term for a cognitive process where we transfer meaning or information from a particular subject to another subject. It is a particular type of similarity between features of two things that makes a comparison possible. Imagine a person watches a movie in which the actors portray a variety of strong human emotions throughout the movie. Then the person could describe the experience of watching the movie as that movie was a roller coaster ride of emotions. Another example of an analogy is a description of life as such. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get next. In this analogy, the uncertainty of the events unfolding in life is compared to the chance factor involved in getting any chocolate from the chocolate box. Analogies have been extensively used by many wisdom teachers as means of imparting knowledge to learners from time immemorial. In the Bible, Jesus says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves." Here, Jesus used the analogy of wolves in sheep's clothing to alert his followers against false prophets who could mislead them. How do analogies work? As we have seen, analogies help by drawing parallels between two otherwise unrelated concepts. Analogies help us to visualize a concept. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Analogies help us to move forward from what is already known and is familiar to us towards what is not clearly known till then. When we study a new concept, what we are essentially doing is to build upon the already existing constructs of percept and concepts that we have in our mind. To understand how analogies help us in learning Atma Vidya, let us see what Natarajaguru tells us regarding the two ways of attaining certitude about the same truth in his book Vedanta Revalued and Restated. One is a priori statement about truth. In simple terms, we can think of this as something like theoretical truths or what Natarajaguru would call as calculables. The other way of reaching the same truth is by demonstrating experimental or practical proofs for the same. Natarajaguru would call them as visibles. For illustrating this, Natarajaguru takes the example of the Pythagorean theorem. Many of you would remember this theorem states that in case of a right angle triangle with sides A and B and hypotenuse C, A square plus B square is equal to C square. Now, in the lower classes of the high school, the teacher may ask the pupils to cut out on paper squares on the two sides of the right angles triangle, and to divide them into convenient bits so as to fit them correctly into the square of the hypotenuse. When the bits fit the latter correctly without overlapping, we arrive at a form of certitude which we call a practical proof. However, in the higher classes, the same theorem is given an algebraic proof by using the relevant formulae and equations. Thus, the two different approaches lead to the same neutral or central truth, which is neither merely practical nor merely theoretical. The visibles and the calculables come together to yield a unitive certitude in the heart of the absolute itself. In case of Advaitha Deepika, one end of the spectrum of wisdom teaching is characterized by a priori statements made by Narayana Guru about the ultimate truth. The visible here is not real. Ultimate limit is consciousness alone. One alone is above all. For the wise man, the world is existence. Knowledge cannot come out by itself. At the other end of the spectrum, we have all the analogies that Guru uses to explain his vision of truth. All the analogies. The a priori statements about truth could be thought of as similar to calculables, and the analogies are akin to visibles. The truth we want to visualize ultimately is neither completely contained in the a priori statements nor perfectly explained by the analogies. Rather, it forms the substratum on which both a priori statements and analogies are built. What an analogy is not. Sigmund Freud, who used the analogy of iceberg to explain his theory of the conscious, preconscious and the unconscious aspects of mind, famously said that analogies, it is true, decide nothing, but they can make one feel more at home. In other words, analogies just help us to familiarize ourselves with the idea or the concept that is meant to be imbibed by understanding the analogy. They serve as aids to understanding, nothing more, nothing less. How do analogies work? As we have seen, analogies help by drawing parallels between two otherwise unrelated concepts. Analogies help us to visualize a concept. A picture is worth 1,000 words. The various analogies are themselves analogous to images of a building which was photographed from different angles. Although one image will look dissimilar to other one, each one adds one more dimension to our understanding about the structure of a building. It should also be borne in mind that the original building is more than all its images put together. Analogies used Analogies used in the Advaitha Deepika. Coming to the title, Advaitha Deepika is the lamp of non-duality. Here, the image of a small lamp which expels physical darkness is invoked to refer to the dawning of light of Vidya or the right kind of knowledge which expels avidya or nishan's. In the process, all dualities vanish. This analogy used in the title is an important one. In the Advaita Deepika, Narayana Guru has liberally used many analogies to elucidate his wisdom teaching. There are 19 verses in the poem, and Guru has altogether used around 22 analogies in them. Some of them, like the analogy of waves and water, analogy of mirage, or the analogy of the snake and the rope, are very well known and favorite Vedantic examples. On the other hand, analogy like the analogy of a piece of a cloth are quite noble and proves beyond doubt that Guru is a rishi or philosopher of the modern times. In the Advaita Deepika, Guru has used some of the analogies more than once and in varying contexts that form part of his vision of truth. It is very important to understand in what context a particular analogy has been used. For example, the analogy of the snake and the rope has been used 4 times in the composition, each time to elucidate subtly different aspects of wisdom teaching. Another intriguing aspect of the use of analogies in this poem is the way in which Guru tactfully uses them to explain how a jnani's realization is different from the jnatsu's doubting mind and ajnani's ignorance. Since a complete verse by verse explanation of the Advaita Deepika is beyond the scope of this presentation, I will try to state in a few words the main aspects of Vedantic wisdom as envisioned by Guru in this composition. The main question that is raised to be answered in the Advaita Deepika is why this world remains perceivable by senses even after realizing that the world has no truth in itself or that the world is not real. To address this seeming conundrum, Guru reminds us that the world is composed of thousands of names, forms, and corresponding interest items, but it is not real in itself. Its reality is the reality of ultimate truth, which is pure chit or consciousness in essence. Chit has ultimate, undisputable or indisputable existence and hence it is the Sat. The Chit or the manifest aspect of the Sat shines as Ananda or the ultimate value sense. At the individual's level, Satchidananda is expressed as Asti Bhadi Priya. An Ajnani takes the apparent world for real. The ignorance which confounds the vision of Ajnani is called avidya or nishans. A jitnyasu is seeking to realize that this world is nothing but Satchidananda. However, since he has not attained ultimate discrimination or vidya, he remains doubtful about the real state of existence of this world. Jnani has his eyes of discrimination wide open, so sees no world existing separate from one underlying pure consciousness. No duality exists for Jnani. In this presentation, I will try to explain only two analogies in detail. The first one is the analogy of the snake and the rope, which is an age-old favorite example in Vedanta. The other one is the analogy of the cloth, which is more like a scientific inquiry in which truth is directly brought out by analysis rather than invoking any comparison between two ideas. The analogy of the dark room snake and the rope. This finds mention in verses 6, 8, 12 and 17 of Advaitha Deepika. Imagine a person is entering a very dimly lit room in his house during the night time. Only vague shadows of objects inside the room are visible. Suddenly, his eyes fall on a snake lying on the dark floor. He panics and lets out a cry. Ah! The possibility of being envenomed by the snake makes him feel really frightened. Reflexively, he takes a step back and switches on the light source in the room. When the room is illuminated by bright light, the person realizes that what he thought was a snake is in reality a piece of rope. In the bright light, the snake is no longer visible and the rope is clearly seen. The person heaves a sigh of relief. The dark room is analogous with avidya or nescience, which causes a person to mistake the unreal for real, and in the process, the real is not seen. The snake stands for the world appearance. Light brought in indicates the dawn of Vidya, which is that function of consciousness by which one discriminates what is real as real and what is unreal as unreal. The perceived snake is scary for the person because past experiences tell him that a snake can harm. The snake form thus embodies the feeling of the other or that which is different from himself or the I. It is the other which forms the world which elicits the fear in the person. When Vidya dawns, nothing but the rope or the ultimate reality is seen to exist. And in that one pure consciousness, there exists no I and the other. Hence, there is no chance for any fear. With his darkness of missions gone, a jnani does not for an instant doubt the existence of anything other than consciousness. Now, let us analyze the mental processes involved in experiencing snake form and rope form. The person who saw the snake thought that something is present in the room, it is a snake and the snake is scary. Similar is Ajnani's world appearance where he thinks that something is present, it is the world and the world gives rise to pain and pleasure. This is the Asti Bhadi Priya of the Ajnani. When the light is put on, the rope which is really existent is seen. Then the corresponding Asti Bhadi Priya would be that there is something present which is a rope and the rope is innocuous or could even be useful. In the wisdom context, this indicates the mental process of a jnani who experiences the world's existence and the knowledge about its existence as manifest forms of one unmanifest consciousness reality. A very important aspect of wisdom teaching that Guru underscores here is that when a person mistakes a rope for a snake, or when he accurately sees the rope as the rope itself, what really existed throughout was the rope. Guru reminds us that both the notions that the snake is present or that the rope is present are pradidis or appearances. These pradidis result from avidya. In fact, both these pradidis of snake and rope have no existence other than rope. Similarly, the vacillating pradidis that the world exists or no, only consciousness exists are caused by avidya, which affects only the ignorant man as well as the Nityasu who is not fully enlightened. The ultimate reality has by itself no affinity for either vidya or for avidya, and it is a substratum for both jnanis and ajnanis knowledge. Before we wind up this time-honored analogy of snake and rope, a passing mention will be made about the modified form of this analogy that Guru uses in verse 20 of Atmobdaya Shadagam, where a flower garland is mentioned instead of a rope. This is a major revaluation of the Priya or Ananda aspect of world reality, in the sense that a flower garland is aesthetically much superior to a mere rope. Mistaking a flower garland for a snake not only frightens the perceiver but also prevents him from enjoying the beauty and fragrance of the flower garland. Likewise, getting immersed in the alternating pain and pleasure cycles of this world prevents us from being one with Paramananda. The analogy of cloth find mention in verses 3 and 14. Imagine looking at a piece of cloth. A cloth is nothing but threads woven together. Thread is nothing but cotton fiber. And what constitutes cotton? Ancient seers would say it's constituted by five basic elements: the earth, fire, water, and space. The modern scientist would say the main component of this thing is cellulose, cotton fiber is cellulose, which in turn could be constituted by atoms like molecules of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and these in turns are constituted by atoms. Atoms are composed of subatomic particles. Subatomic particles are in turn constituted by elementary particles like quarks and leptons. And what constitutes them? We are yet exploring, we don't know yet, but we know that the cloth exists. So the basic constituent also should exist. See the statement again. So we know that the cloth exists. So even if we take the explanation given by the ancient rishis or that provided by scientists, we essentially arrive at the same place only, that is knowledge. Knowledge is just an awareness or consciousness. We already knew that knowledge about cloth occurs in consciousness. Here Guru has proven to us that even the object of that knowledge, that is the cloth itself, is also consciousness. One could say this is an ascending thought process. When we see the cloth, it seems as if it has an independent existence. Let us see the constituent thread. The cloth has vanished. Further, when the cotton fiber is seen, the existence of thread is not there. So on and so forth until we reach the ultimate reality with indisputable existence. So, what is the real status of the existence of cloth form, thread form, and the like? Guru says all these have mirage-like existence in consciousness. The mental process which led us to think that cloth and the like have their own independent existence apart from the underlying consciousness is avidya. When the ultimate reality is seen, this avidya, with all its confounding effects, also becomes one with that reality. So when we see one pure consciousness only as existing as and pure consciousness existing as all the cloth forms, thread forms, cotton fiber forms, atom forms, lepton forms and all, we say this is a descending thought process or descending uh, way of thinking at looking at things. So in the next few slides, I have given the titles of the remaining analogies roughly in the order of their appearance in the work, along with some representative images. I hope that the listeners would get some cues from these images and find out for themselves the meaning of all these analogies. The commentary on Advaitha Deepika, written by our beloved Guru Muni Narayana Prasad, will be of great help in understanding the deeper meanings of these analogies. Analogy of the dreamer's mind, analogy of mirage, analogy of waves and water. The various analogies are themselves analogous to. So in the next few slides, I have given the titles of the remaining analogy of clay and vessels, analogy of confusion in directions, analogy of shining sun and the blind man, analogy of the potent seed. The dark room is analogous with avidya, analogy of different orders of appearances. Dear one in self, my name is Deepanjali. Analogy of I seeing everything but itself. Analogy of the blind man with open and closed eyes. Om Tat Sat. Namaskar.